Once upon a time, in a quiet little town surrounded by tall forests and whispering winds, lived a man named Oliver. He wasn't rich or famous, but he had something special curiosity. Oliver loved exploring nature, collecting rocks, and imagining that hidden worlds existed somewhere beyond what we could see. One golden afternoon, Oliver packed his backpack, grabbed his camera, and set off for a hike deep into the old forest at the edge of town. The air was fresh, and the light danced through the trees like falling gold. Oliver walked for hours, humming to himself. Suddenly, something shiny caught his eye beneath a mossy root. It was a small, glowing blue stone round like a marble, sparkling with tiny lights inside. Oliver picked it up. "It's beautiful," he whispered. But the moment his fingers touched the stone, whoosh! A swirl of blue and white light wrapped around him. The ground shook. The wind howled. Then, silence. When Oliver opened his eyes, he gasped. Everything looked different. The trees were tiny. The hills looked like little bumps. The flowers were no bigger than his fingernails. Even the butterflies looked like floating sparkles. Oliver rubbed his eyes. Where am I?" he said in disbelief. He had entered a parallel world, a place known as the Little World, the land of the Durffs. Oliver looked around. He saw tiny houses with roofs made of shells and acorn tops. Little people, no taller than a pencil, were farming in fields, driving mini tractors, and fishing in rivers the size of ribbons. There were small cows mooing softly, chickens that chirped instead of clucked, and cats that could fit in the palm of his hand. Oliver laughed softly, amazed. "This is incredible," he whispered. But then, the tiny people noticed him. At first, they froze. Then, "A giant!" shouted one. "Run for your lives!" squeaked another. Little Durffs hid behind mushrooms and inside tree holes. Oliver quickly sat down so he wouldn't look scary. "Wait, please don't be afraid," he said gently. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." From behind a bush, a brave little Durf peeked out. He wore a green hat and carried a small wooden stick. "My name is Milo," the little one said, trembling. "Who are you, giant?" Oliver smiled kindly. "I'm Oliver. I come from, well, I think from another world. I touched a strange stone and somehow ended up here." The Durfs whispered to each other. Finally, Milo stepped forward again. "If you promise not to crush us," he said, "you can come to our village. Our queen will want to meet you." Milo led Oliver to a valley filled with tiny houses, glowing lamps, and busy little Durfs working together. Everywhere Oliver looked, he saw a world that was just like his own, but in miniature. Tiny factories puffed little clouds of steam. Mini trains ran on silver tracks no wider than a finger. There were even schools, parks, and markets filled with tiny laughter. When they reached the center of the village, the queen of the Durfs, Queen Lyra, stood waiting. She wore a dress made of flower petals and a crown of dewdrops. She looked up at Oliver and said in a calm, royal voice, "Welcome, traveler from the big world. We have never seen someone like you before." Oliver bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, I didn't mean to come here by accident. I don't want to cause any trouble." Queen Lyra smiled. "You have caused no trouble, Oliver. You are our guest. The Durfs believe in kindness to strangers." The Durfs cheered. "3 cheers for Oliver the Giant," they shouted. They prepared a feast, tiny pies, tiny fruits, even a drop of honey served in a nutshell. Oliver ate carefully, trying not to swallow the table. That night, the Durfs built him a bed of soft leaves and petals. The stars above the little world sparkled brighter than he had ever seen. Oliver whispered, "This world may be small, but it's full of big hearts." Days passed, and Oliver became friends with everyone. He helped farmers harvest their crops with just a few sweeps of his hands. He helped build bridges across tiny rivers using sticks and pebbles. The Durf children loved riding on his shoulders, calling him Big Friend Oliver. Everything was peaceful until one stormy morning. Milo ran up to Oliver's camp, panting. "Oliver! Oliver! The Grunks are coming!" The Grunks were the Durf's enemies, tiny, rough-looking creatures who lived in the dark mountains beyond the valley. They wanted to steal the Durf's farms and capture their queen. Hundreds of them marched toward the village, carrying flaming twigs as torches. The Durfs trembled. Their catapults and arrows were small, too small to fight a full army. Queen Lyra stood firm. "My people, we will not run. We will defend our home." But the Durfs were scared. Oliver knelt beside her and said, "Your Majesty, let me help." Queen Lyra looked up at him. "You would fight for us, Oliver?" He nodded. "You welcomed me when you were afraid. Now it's my turn to protect you." Oliver got to work. Using branches, he built tall wooden walls around the village. He dug small trenches that became deep rivers for the tiny attackers. He made giant catapults from vines and tree bark, loading them with stones the size of marbles, massive boulders to the Grunks. When the Grunks charged down the hills, shouting war cries, Oliver took a deep breath. "Everyone, stay behind me," he called. The first wave of Grunks reached the wall. Boom! Oliver stomped his foot gently, shaking the ground like an earthquake. The Grunks stumbled and ran in fear. But more came. They climbed trees, shot tiny flaming arrows, and tried to break through the walls. Oliver grabbed handfuls of leaves and tossed them like rain. To the Durfs, it was a storm of courage. Finally, he picked up a huge log and placed it in front of the main gate. "This is your line," he shouted. "Don't let anyone cross it." The Durfs, inspired by Oliver's bravery, fought back with all their might. Tiny catapults fired acorns. Many soldiers marched in perfect rows. Together, they stood strong. By sunset, the Grunks were retreating, terrified. Their leader growled, "This isn't over, giant." But the Durfs cheered with joy. "Oliver! Oliver! Our hero!" they shouted. That night, the village glowed with celebration. The Durfs danced, sang songs, and lit hundreds of tiny lanterns that floated into the sky like glowing stars. Queen Lyra raised her tiny cup. "To our friend, Oliver, who saved the little world from darkness." Everyone clapped and cheered. Oliver smiled, his eyes shining with pride and love. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "You were all brave. You showed me that even little people can do great things." The queen stepped forward and handed him a small box made of crystal. Inside it was another glowing blue stone. "This will take you home," she said softly. "But remember, Oliver, once someone becomes a friend of the Durfs, they are a friend forever." Oliver knelt down and said goodbye to Milo and the others. The children hugged his fingers, not wanting him to leave. He smiled warmly. "I'll never forget you, my little friends." He touched the stone. Whoosh! In an instant, he was back in his own forest. The trees were tall again. The air was still. He looked around, holding the glowing stone in his hand. For a moment, he thought it was all a dream. But then he noticed something on his sleeve. A single tiny flower from the little world. He smiled. "Maybe the worlds aren't so far apart after all," he whispered. Oliver learned that size doesn't matter, heart does. The Durfs might have been small, but their kindness, courage, and unity were greater than any giant's strength. So remember, no matter how small you are, you can make a big difference, just like the Durfs. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Tiny Facts for more magical adventures.